Okay, I am going to paint a cloud demonstration for you guys. I am working at an angle and I am using cerulean blue across the top. I'm going to kind of paint around where I want my white clouds to be. I'm going to try to get 3 clouds. I'm kind of working small so I can do a few demonstrations here on this pad of paper. And I've got 3 there. So after I start with the top of the sky, which is going to be my darkest value, put a little bit more of the cerulean in. Then I'm going to come with clean water, and I have tissues, Kleenex tissues, lotion free. What I'm doing is I'm using clean water and I'm going to go right up to the edge. Kind of agitate that, dry it a little bit. I'm just going to very, very lightly press. I can even go up a little bit higher and get rid of this hard edge. And put a little bit more water here and just kind of let that push out a little bit into the sky. And I'm going to go ahead and lift here as well. Try to soften that edge. And let's do this little cloud. Soften, and then I'll do this last one over here. And then on the palette I also have mixed up some of the darker color or a neutral color to do on the undersides of the clouds. It's really important when you guys are lifting your clouds out that you press very, very gently. If you press too hard, you press the paint into the paper and it makes almost like a little fingerprint. So you just want to very, very lightly and gently just lift off. Let's see if I can soften this up a little bit more. I may have to just conjoin these two here. And I'm just using clean water and just kind of trying to agitate that. It seems that it dried relatively quickly. So while this is still a little bit wet, I think I'll just drop a little bit of paint in there and see if I can get a little bit of a value change, a little darker. And just kind of pull this down, go across this top a little bit more, nice and soft and puffy. I really want this very top of the painting to be quite dark. Your cerulean is going to be one of your colors that granulates. So you get kind of a nice texture. I think it's really the most beautiful color for sky. Okay, so that's pretty soft across the top. Now I'm going to use clean water and I'm going to go onto the bottom of the cloud and I'm just going to put a little swipe of clean water into the white, but not all the way up to the top. And I'll just do all 3 of these. And then I'm going to drop in my Triad. The Triad that I made, if you mix a Triad of yellow, red, and blue, you'll get a nice gray. And I think it may be off the camera, but I made a Triad of cerulean and cadmium yellow and a little bit of the alizarin. No, I'm sorry, a little bit of the rose. Just kind of getting this. I want it to look very gray. And I'm going to just drop this in across the middle. So this is cerulean and rose and a little bit of the cadmium yellow. It's going to just go right across that little bit of blue right there. I'm just putting this in wherever I drop that clean water. I'm just setting this right into it. And this might separate a little bit. You can kind of start to see a little bit of separation with some of the pink. I'm gonna have to babysit this just a touch to make sure that it maintains its soft appearance. I don't want any hard lines on this. I want it to be nice and soft. And I can go in with my clean tissue and kind of lift out a few little areas. Once I lift out the paint and the water, it changes the saturation of the water to paper ratio, really. It kind of makes it a little drier, makes the paper a little bit drier so things move a little bit less. I like what's happening over on this side. You have a nice little pink underneath and some kind of dark color here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of the cerulean, but this is going to be lighter than the top, just like if you look at the horizon line, it starts to lighten up as you go, as you look at the sky, it starts to lighten as you go down the horizon line. And I'm just going to carry this lighter wash underneath the underside of my clouds. And I can carry this all the way down to the bottom of the paper. So this is my graded wash. I have a little bit of a hard line right here, so I may dip a little bit more of the cerulean right in through there, let that kind of carry down. Maybe get a little darker through these little pockets up through here. If I do that, I need to definitely carry that all the way to the top so that it looks nice and consistent, nice and flat. Let's see, I'll just lift a little bit of that out, just very lightly with the tissue. But I think those are pretty soft and puffy. This value compared to the top may be a little too contrasting, so I'm gonna put just a touch more into here. You know, initially when you put that gray in, it looks really, really dark, but as the watercolor dries, it does lighten up quite a bit. So just kind of keep that in mind, that as your watercolor dries, it will be a few shades lighter than what it initially looks like when it's wet. And I'm just moving this across, kind of keeping things very soft. I think I'd like to soften this up just a little bit, and it's still wet, so I can just very gently go in and dab. And if I'm losing this gray contrast, I can go in before it completely dries and just add a little bit more. I'm just mixing up a little bit more of the neutral off to the side. Let's just, while this is nice and wet, and I think maybe at this point, I'm gonna flatten out my paper. Here we go. So I was working at an angle, but now that I'm kind of getting to the bottom, I'm just gonna go a little flatter. And just work this in, get a little dark cloud here, a little bit there. Let that kind of carry, and then into this one. We'll see. I had initially, hopefully you remember when I was lifting off, on this section I was really going in with the tissue. So now you can see definitely that the saturation of the paper right here is quite dry. So I definitely need to go back in with a wet brush, and I'll just soften this up a little bit with some water. And then once again, just lift with a clean tissue. This is not an exercise that I do paper towels with. I like to use the tissues. It doesn't leave any sort of a pattern or anything, and it's really quite gentle. The other thing I like to do sometimes too is I like to take just a touch of the alizarin, I'm sorry, I keep saying alizarin, but the rose and the cadmium, and I just mix up a touch of orange. And while this is wet, I like to just touch some of these clouds with just a little bit of this very, very faint orange, just a little bit. And it's gonna look a little strong at first, and then it should lighten up. So put a few more in here. And this is still nice and wet, but it gives it a nice contrast. I think if you really look at clouds, they do have some yellow in them from the reflection of the sun. So, okay, hopefully this helps you guys as you work on your homework and practice. I'm gonna do another one using just wet on wet technique. You guys are gonna see this and think, why didn't she teach this first? But I want you guys to learn the trickier one and then go to the easier one. All right, take care.